Imagine being worshipped as a god, only to tell the world you are nothing without the giants who came before you. That's exactly what Eric Clapton did. In the 1960s, London walls were graffitied with the words, "Clapton is God." Fans treated him as the ultimate guitar hero, the man who could bend 6 strings into divinity. But decades later, Clapton shattered that myth with a shocking confession.
I was imitating. To be honest with you, I was copying what I heard on record and trying to do it that way. And as time went by, when I started to meet my heroes,
I didn't invent anything.
Has built his reputation as a blues player on just these qualities, subtlety and delicacy.
I just listened. For a man who built some of the greatest solos in rock history, this was no false modesty. It was his truth. Clapton admitted that his playing, his phrasing, even his identity as a musician came from studying 7 men. 7 guitarists whose names might not all dominate the mainstream, but without them, there would be no Clapton. He described himself as a messenger, a bridge between the raw pioneers of the blues and the massive audiences of rock. That humility doesn't lower his legend, it raises the stakes, because if Clapton is a god, then who were the titans strong enough to shape him? Today we journey into Clapton's sacred list, the 7 players he worshipped, borrowed from, and honored. Their influence isn't hidden, it's written in every note Clapton ever played. Keep watching till the end of the video, the last one might surprise you. B.B. King, the teacher of emotion. When Clapton talks about B.B. King, his voice softens. He doesn't just admire him as a guitarist, he reveres him as a teacher. B.B. wasn't known for speed or complex riffs. He was known for making one note say more than 100. His famous guitar, Lucille, sang with a vibrato so expressive that it could bring an audience to tears. Clapton often said he spent years trying to master that vibrato, not by imitating it directly, but by understanding what B.B. was really doing, putting his heart into every single bend. For Clapton, B.B. King was the proof that less is more. Every pause, every lingering note carried more weight than a flurry of sound. Their bond went beyond admiration. In 2000, the two recorded Riding with the King, a collaboration that won a Grammy and cemented their teacher-student relationship. On that record, you can hear Clapton defer, leaving space, letting B.B.'s guitar take the lead, and showing humility despite his superstar status. Clapton later said that the record wasn't about showing off. It was about celebrating the man who gave him permission to feel through music. What Clapton absorbed from B.B. wasn't just technique, it was philosophy. Music wasn't about perfection, it was about honesty. If you listen closely to Clapton's most famous solos, Tears in Heaven, Layla, Unplugged, or his Cream-era Crossroads, you can trace the DNA back to B.B. King. It's the bending of a single note that carries sadness, the silence between licks that makes space for breath. Clapton learned that a guitar can speak like a human being, and that lesson came directly from B.B. King. Without him, Clapton might have been fast, technical, and flashy, but he would have lacked soul. Robert Johnson, The Crossroads, Prophet. If B.B. King gave Clapton soul, Robert Johnson gave him the blues' deepest mythology. Johnson lived in Mississippi during the 1930s, recording just 29 songs before his mysterious death at 27. Yet those songs became the Bible of the blues. Johnson's voice was haunting, his lyrics cryptic, and his playing so advanced that even decades later, musicians struggled to believe one man could have created it. Legends claimed he sold his soul to the devil at the crossroads in exchange for his talent, a story that only added to the power of his music. For Clapton, discovering Johnson wasn't just about music, it was about awakening. He described the first time he heard Crossroad Blues as if he had stumbled onto a secret universe. Johnson's songs weren't polished. They were raw, crackling recordings full of pain, loneliness, and defiance. Clapton felt that Johnson wasn't just playing guitar, he was confessing his soul. That direct line from emotion to sound would become Clapton's lifelong compass. Clapton honored Johnson in multiple ways. His iconic Crossroads performances with Cream were direct tributes, reinterpreting Johnson's song for massive rock audiences. Later in 2004, Clapton recorded Me and Mr. Johnson, a full album of Johnson's songs. He didn't try to modernize them with studio tricks. He played them as close to Johnson's raw spirit as possible. He wanted new generations to feel what he felt when he first heard that eerie voice on scratchy vinyl. Clapton has called Johnson the most important blues musician who ever lived. That's no small praise. To Clapton, Johnson wasn't just an influence. He was the foundation. Without Johnson, there would be no Delta Blues, no Muddy Waters, no B.B. King, and by extension, no Clapton. His entire world rested on the shoulders of a man who left behind fewer than 30 songs. That's how powerful Robert Johnson was. Jimi Hendrix, the challenger who changed the rules. Clapton was already at the top of the guitar world when Jimi Hendrix walked into London. The night Hendrix performed at the Bag O'Nails Club in 1966, Clapton was in the audience. What he saw shocked him. Hendrix didn't just play the guitar, he attacked it, caressed it, manipulated it until it sounded like something from another world. Clapton later admitted that watching Hendrix was terrifying. "You never told me he was that good," he reportedly told friends afterward. Hendrix broke every rule Clapton thought he knew. He turned feedback into music, distortion into poetry, and showmanship into something spiritual. Clapton's playing was rooted in the blues, built on structure and tradition, but Hendrix expanded the language of the guitarist into psychedelic chaos. Yet Clapton didn't feel resentment. He felt awe. He invited Hendrix to share stages, and their brief collaborations became legendary. What Hendrix gave Clapton wasn't a technique, it was permission to go further. He showed that the guitar could be infinite, that there were no boundaries except the ones you imposed on yourself. Clapton didn't copy Hendrix because he knew no one could. Instead, he let Hendrix's wildness seep into his own music, inspiring him to push past comfort zones. Even today, Clapton admits that Hendrix left him changed. He said Hendrix turned the world upside down. Clapton's humility here is striking. The man hailed as the greatest was willing to admit that Hendrix, in many ways, surpassed him. That acknowledgement is what makes Clapton's list so powerful. He never pretended to be the sole genius. He always knew he was part of a larger, evolving story of guitar. Muddy Waters, the father of electric blues. For Clapton, discovering Muddy Waters was like discovering electricity itself. Born McKinley Morganfield, Muddy brought the Delta Blues to Chicago and then plugged it into an amplifier. That single decision changed everything, not only for blues musicians, but for the birth of rock and roll. Without Muddy, there is no Rolling Stones, no Led Zeppelin, no Cream. Clapton openly admitted that his earliest ambition wasn't to be a rock star, it was to sound like Muddy Waters. Muddy's voice was deep, commanding, almost like a sermon, and his slide guitar created a sound that felt ancient yet modern at the same time. Songs like Hoochie Coochie Man and Manish Boy weren't just music, they were declarations of identity and power. Clapton, a shy and reserved English kid, saw in Muddy a model of strength. Playing blues wasn't just about sadness, it was about claiming your place in the world. When Clapton finally met Muddy, he described it as one of the greatest honors of his life. He often said that shaking Muddy's hand felt like touching history itself. He later brought Muddy on stage, not as an opening act, but as a hero, giving him the respect he deserved. That humility again reveals Clapton's character. He never forgot who built the road he was walking on. Muddy's influence is clear in Clapton's rawer blues records, especially From the Cradle, where Clapton stripped away studio polish to recreate the energy of those old Chicago clubs. The growling riffs, the sliding notes, the authority in the delivery, all of that was Clapton channeling Muddy Waters. In the end, Muddy Waters didn't just shape Clapton's guitar, he shaped his identity. He showed him that blues was not background music, but a declaration of survival and pride. Clapton knew he was standing on Muddy's shoulders every time he plugged in his guitar. Buddy Guy, the wild card of the blues. If Muddy Waters gave Clapton authority, Buddy Guy gave him fire. Buddy was unpredictable, explosive, and sometimes downright chaotic on stage. He could whisper on the guitar one moment and then blast the audience with a screaming solo the next. He wasn't interested in perfection. He was interested in making people feel something. Clapton once said that watching Buddy Guy perform was like being hit by a thunderstorm. Buddy's playing style was a roller coaster. He used feedback long before Hendrix, bent strings so aggressively they seemed to cry out, and walked into the crowd mid-solo to make sure the audience couldn't escape the experience. For Clapton, who grew up in the structured, polite world of England, Buddy Guy represented freedom. He showed that the guitar wasn't just an instrument, it was a weapon, a confession, and sometimes a joke all at once. Clapton later called Buddy the greatest guitar player alive. That's an incredible statement, considering Clapton's own status. But it reflects the truth. Buddy influenced not just Clapton, but Hendrix, Stevie Ray Vaughan, and countless others. He was the link between the old Delta tradition and modern electric fireworks. What Clapton absorbed most from Buddy was the courage to take risks. Freddie King, the Texas tornado of all the three kings of the blues, Freddie King was perhaps the one who lit the biggest fire under Clapton's fingers. Freddie was raw, loud, and almost rock and roll before rock even had a name. His instrumental tracks like Hideaway and The Stumble became essential study material for young guitarists across Britain. Clapton, barely out of his teens, memorized those solos note for note. Freddie's style was different from B.B. or Albert. He combined a Texas blues toughness with a soulful edge that could both punch and soothe in the same song. He played with his fingers instead of a pick, giving his sound a snapping intensity that felt alive. Clapton said that when he first tried to replicate Freddie's style, it felt impossible. But that challenge pushed him to practice endlessly, shaping the sharpness and clarity of his own playing. In Cream's fiery live performances, especially their renditions of blues standards, Freddie's influence was clear. The aggressive attack, the willingness to let the guitar scream and wail, that came directly from Freddie King. Clapton later covered Freddie's songs not just as a tribute, but as a confession of how much he owed him. Freddie King also represented something deeper for Clapton. He wasn't just a guitarist, he was a showman. He bridged the gap between blues clubs and big stages, paving the way for blues musicians to step into the spotlight. That path is the same one Clapton walked, taking the blues from small clubs to global arenas. Without Freddie King, Clapton might have stayed in the shadows. Clapton has called Freddie's music the soundtrack of my youth. That isn't nostalgia, it's truth. Freddie gave him the blueprint for explosive energy, and Clapton carried that blueprint into every band he ever played with. Albert King, the master of the sting. Finally, we arrive at Albert King, the man Clapton called the most intimidating guitarist I ever faced. Albert's weapon was simplicity. He didn't play fast, he didn't play flashy.
Walking on down the street.
But when he bent a string, it was like the earth moved. His guitar, famously a left-handed flying V, gave him a distinctive tone that Clapton said was instantly recognizable. Albert's solos often relied on just a handful of notes, but the way he delivered them was devastating. Clapton once admitted that he tried for years to capture Albert's feel, but could never truly do it. Albert had a way of making a single note sting like lightning, then letting the silence afterward do the rest of the talking. For Clapton, Albert represented restraint. In a world where young guitarists often try to show off with speed, Albert proved that power comes from patience. Clapton applied that lesson in songs like Wonderful Tonight,
In no white room with black curtains by the stage.
where the guitar doesn't overwhelm. It whispers, it sighs, it communicates emotion with precision. That's Albert King's legacy inside Clapton's playing. Clapton also admired Albert for his courage. As a black bluesman in a segregated America, Albert carved his own path with determination. He wasn't chasing trends or trying to please anyone. He played his truth, and people had no choice but to respect it. Clapton, in his own career, often took inspiration from that bravery, choosing authenticity over commercial compromise. When you listen to Clapton's blues work, you can hear Albert's fingerprints everywhere. The sting of a note, the deliberate pacing, the emotional weight, it's all Albert King living inside Clapton's hands. Clapton's eternal debt to the blues. At the end of the day, Eric Clapton's greatness isn't just in what he played, but in what he admitted. He never claimed to be self-made. He always pointed back to the seven giants: B.B. King, Robert Johnson, Jimi Hendrix, Muddy Waters, Buddy Guy, Freddie King, and Albert King, who shaped him. That honesty makes his legacy even stronger. He wasn't God, as the graffiti once said. He was a student, a vessel, and a bridge between the old and the new. By honoring his heroes, Clapton preserved the lineage of the blues. Every time someone listens to him, they are also hearing echoes of Johnson's haunted voice, B.B.'s tender vibrato, Muddy's authority, Buddy's chaos, Freddie's fire, Albert's sting, and Hendrix's cosmic vision. Without them, there is no Clapton. And without Clapton, perhaps their names wouldn't have traveled so far.